You also asked if you breaking the circumcision covenant was the only thing I was basing my reasons off in order to say that I don't believe you are Elijah. And my answer to you is this. You breaking the covenant of circumcision with Jehovah was only number one on the list of reasons, not the only one on the list, but it just so happened that I made 4 separate videos concerning that one topic. Number 2 on the growing list of reasons. Now I guess that it grew and it's growing. No, it's not growing. That's also the reason why yesterday, when I republished your 4 parts video, I made it closed. You notice how I did not only put it upside down, but I also closed it at part 4, because I made it part 1 of 4, 2 of 4, 3 of 4, and 4 of 4, like closing it. That's why, because on your YouTube channel it was ongoing. I closed it. Number 2 on the growing list of reasons will be addressed soon enough, and after that we can move on to number 3 and so on. Don't worry, Jonathan, because there's plenty more to come. I'm glad to hear this, because I know that Marianne is going to be thinking about me every day then.
What's in a name? Triple-double Crunchwrap. Triple-double Crunchwrap. Double Crunchwrap, 2 layers. Triple-double Crunchwrap. So the name implies that this would have 6 layers, but I don't think it does.
And when it's saying in the Bible, I will send you Elijah, it's not neither I will send you the spirit of Elijah. I will send you Elijah. The spirit of Elijah rests upon Elisha, but I will send you Elijah. In Matthew 11, now, Matthew 11, okay, Matthew 11, and said unto him, Or do he that should come, or do we look for another? Jesus answered and said unto them, Go and shew John again those things which ye do hear and see. So they went to John the Baptist. Here it says John. So they went to John the Baptist. Here it says John. It didn't say John the Baptist, but they went toward John the Baptist because they took it for granted. Okay, it means John the Baptist.
Are you sure about this, Jonathan? You're saying that they just took it for granted that Jesus was talking about John the Baptist. And just how do you arrive at that conclusion? Because I'm curious as to why they wouldn't have thought that it was John the Baptist to begin with. Because it was John the Baptist who initiated the conversation with the 2 messengers to begin with when he was in prison. So if you have a guy named John who is in prison, who you know is John the Baptist, asking you to go to Jesus in order to ask him questions because he wants to make sure that Jesus was who that they said they were waiting for?
And said unto him, Or do he that should come, or do we look for another?
And then, when Jesus tells you what you need to go back and tell John, what in the world makes you think that the 2 messengers took for granted that Jesus was talking about John the Baptist, so that's why they went to him?
Jesus answered and said unto them, Go and shew John again those things which ye do hear and see.
Why wouldn't they go back to John the Baptist with the reply from Jesus to begin with? I mean, John the Baptist was the one who told the messengers to go to Jesus in the first place.
So they went to John the Baptist. Here it says John. Here it says John.
But you're making sure that you didn't read verse 2 in order to try to keep the fact that it was John the Baptist who initiated the questions in the first place. So of course they're going to bring the answers back to him. I mean, it's not rocket science.
And said unto him, Or do he that should come, or do we look for another? Jesus answered and said unto them, Go and shew John again those things which ye do hear and see.
I mean, I have 2 things to ask you, Jonathan. And that would be, why did you start at verse 3? Because verse 2 is talking about when John the Baptist was in prison and he heard of all the great things that Jesus was doing, and he wanted to go find out for himself by having two of his disciples go ask Jesus if he was the one that they were waiting for, or should they be looking for somebody else?
And said unto him, Or do he that should come, or do we look for another?
You say that they went to John the Baptist after Jesus told them to go back and show John those things that have been done. And even though Jesus didn't say to go show John the Baptist those things, Jonathan, you're saying that the two messengers took it for granted that Jesus was talking about John the Baptist.
It didn't say John the Baptist, but they went toward John the Baptist because they took it for granted. Okay, he means John the Baptist.
And that's got to be your own personal interpretation too, Jonathan, because I see this thing completely different than you do apparently, because where in the Bible does it say that the messengers took for granted that Jesus was talking about John the Baptist, not some other John that just happened to be floating around at the time?
Because they took it for granted. Okay, he means John the Baptist.
But do you want to see a surefire way of knowing whether or not it was John the Baptist or not that Jesus was talking about? The best way is to turn to Luke chapter 7, verse 18 through 22, because this is describing the exact same event as in Matthew 11. But it includes a nugget that I don't think you're going to be able to overturn, Jonathan.
Believe it or not, by subject, I'm going to overturn your video that you said that you challenged me over. Are you stupid or what?
So let me read it real quick and we can compare it to Matthew, and then I think you'll start to understand a little better where I'm coming from. Messengers from John the Baptist, Luke 7:18. And the disciples of John showed him all of these things. And John, calling unto him two of his disciples, sent them to Jesus, saying, Art thou he that should come, or look we for another? When the men were come unto him, they said, John Baptist hath sent us to thee, saying, Art thou he that should come, or look we for another? And in that same hour he cured many of their infirmities and plagues and evil spirits, and unto many that were blind he gave sight. Then Jesus answering said unto them, Go your way, and tell John what things ye have seen and heard, how that the blind see, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, and the dead are raised. To the poor the gospel is preached. Okay, so both of these passages have the two disciples of John being told by John to go and ask Jesus if he was the one to come, or should they be looking for somebody else. And you're right, Jonathan, there are a lot of Johns without the last name being spoken of in these verses, but none of that matters when you recognize Luke 7 verse 20, where it says, When the men were come unto him, they said, John Baptist hath sent us unto thee, saying, Art thou he that should come, or look we for another? So, when the men were come unto him, so it's talking about the two messengers that John sent to ask Jesus a question, and it's the same John as the John found in Matthew. But then it starts to elaborate a little bit, where the messengers say directly to Jesus that it was John Baptist that had sent them to ask him whether or not he was the one. And I'm going to have to rely on my gut feelings here, where it says that it was John Baptist who sent those two messengers to Jesus. And I'm going to have to say that the KJV got it wrong and left out the word the. I think they meant to say John the Baptist, just like every other Bible had it written down. And I mean every other Bible. And if I slowly scroll down these verses here on the left, you're going to see that every version out there except for the KJV has it written down as John the Baptist and not John Baptist. I mean, that doesn't even sound right to me. And you know what, Jonathan? If you think that the KJV is the only Bible that got it right, what exactly would the parable be that would be getting lost in all of the other corrupt versions out there that added the word the? What do they have to gain?
So are you sure that he was really referring to John the Baptist? Why all of this speech concerning John? And as they departed, Jesus began to say unto the multitude concerning John, What went ye out into the wilderness to see? A reed shaken with the wind. But what went ye out for to see? A man clothed in soft raiment? Behold, they that wear soft clothing are in kings' houses. But what went ye out for to see? A prophet? Yea, I say unto you, and more than a prophet. So why Jesus would say to the people, Go and see John the Baptist? Because he was talking about John the Baptist. They took for granted that he was talking about John the Baptist, but then when they go to John the Baptist saying that it's not him that you should be looking for. So why Jesus would lead them to John the Baptist when they are with John the Baptist is leading them back where they were sent from? Well, dumb ass. Because, voice of Jane, you really sound dumb on this one.
Nowhere in these verses did John the Baptist, or whatever John you want to see in there, never did he tell his two disciples that he wasn't the one they were looking for.
But then when they go to John the Baptist saying that it's not him that you should be looking for.
And that's because that was the question that was directed towards Jesus, not John. John was the one who was asking that question of Jesus, not the other way around. The message back to John was to inform him basically that what he was hearing was true. Not asking John if he was the one everybody had been waiting for. You got this story all backwards, Jonathan.
Okay, so, it says John. Not John the Baptist. They took for granted. He's describing someone else. I'm telling you, okay? You see, okay, when Jesus saying concerning John, they thought to themselves, which John do we know that could fit that role? And then they thought, okay, John the Baptist is right there. Everybody's around him. So they thought John the Baptist.
John the Baptist is right there. Let's just say John the Baptist. I mean, where do you get that stuff from, Jonathan? John the Baptist was in prison. He wasn't right there in the crowd, so we'll choose him.
And then they thought, okay, John the Baptist is right there. Everybody's around him. So they thought John the Baptist.
I mean, honestly, Jonathan, where did you get that? And don't start mixing up the stories here either, because we're still talking about the two messengers of John the Baptist. We're not talking about when Jesus started speaking to the multitude about the John with no last name as those two messengers were leaving. No, we're still talking about the two messenger story here. Because I want to make sure that we now all know for sure that it was John the Baptist because of Luke 7 verse 20, where it specifically says that the two messengers spoke to Jesus and told him that it was John the Baptist who had sent them. Now don't you think that that's a pretty significant verse that overturns your claims that the Johns spoken of in the Bible, the Johns that don't have the title the Baptist attached to it? Well, then that means that John has to be talking about somebody else.
But Jesus here in the word is not saying John the Baptist. He's saying, he said unto the multitude concerning John.
But that's not true, Jonathan. And I'm going to throw a challenge out there to you for you to prove it.
He's describing someone else. I'm telling you, okay?
And it's because of this type of reasoning that you're presenting right here. That's why I can't get on board with what you're saying. When you're so emphatic about needing his entire John the Baptist name and title written out, because if it only says John and not John the Baptist, why, you could be talking about any old John that might be hanging around down on the street corners. And that most certainly can't mean John the Baptist, right?
But Jesus here in the word is not saying John the Baptist. He's saying, he said unto the multitude concerning John.
But let me show you why I disagree with you, Jonathan, and that in those places where it only says John and not John the Baptist, that they're still talking about John. Because John was his actual name. His name wasn't John the Baptist. That was his title, yeah, but it wasn't his name. His name was John. And I'll prove it by showing you what his family said that his name was. And his family called him John. Luke 1:13. But the angel said unto him, Fear not, Zacharias, for thy prayer is heard, and thy wife Elizabeth shall bear thee a son, and thou shalt call his name John. See, it doesn't say, and thou shalt call his name John the Baptist. It says, thou shalt call him John. And that's why you find so many Johns floating around out there, because John was his actual name. Luke 1:60. And his mother answered and said, not so, but he shall be called John, not John the Baptist. Luke 1:63. And he asked for a writing table and wrote, saying, his name is John. And they marveled all. So there we have 3 verses that are speaking about a male child that was born, and his parents named him John. They didn't name him John the Baptist. That title wasn't given to him till much later. And even though he might have been better known as John the Baptist, his name was still John. And if you were to take all these standalone Johns in context, you'd then see that they're all referring to John the Baptist, Jonathan. So I found 109 verses that I personally believe all deal with John the Baptist. And even if they only have it written down as John, it's my opinion that they're all speaking of John the Baptist, and not Jonathan Nolan, or any other John. The first 3 verses were when he was born and his mother and father named him John in the book of Luke. Those verses seem pretty straightforward, that the person who was born and eventually grew up to be widely known as John the Baptist, that his name was John. So I can't understand how you keep getting excited when you see the name of John without his title being attached to it, because you say that they're talking about a different John there. So that way you can try to slip in your name, Jonathan Nolan, into the mix and try to clarify its legitimacy by telling everybody that that's not John the Baptist and that they're really talking about you.
But Jesus here in the word, he's not saying John the Baptist. He's saying, he said unto the multitude concerning John. But then he's talking concerning John, and then they take for granted that he's talking about John the Baptist.
And then you have 13 more verses that will come right out and refer to John as John the Baptist. So I don't really see how anybody could argue that they might be talking about someone other than John in those 13 verses. And then you have 2 more verses that call him just John Baptist and not John the Baptist. And I already pointed it out earlier, Luke 7 verse 20, when John the Baptist sent his 2 messengers to ask Jesus a question. And the 2 messengers, they plainly told Jesus that it was John Baptist who had sent them. So is John Baptist still talking about the same John that was born in Luke 1? The same John that people would later refer to as John the Baptist? And I still stand by my comment about it being an error in the KJV, and it's not the only one, mind you, because while I was reading earlier, I came across yet another error in Matthew 14 verse 8, where it too only says John Baptist, and not John the Baptist. And just like when I looked up how many other counterfeit Bibles out there had it written in the same way as John Baptist, and I quickly found out that the number of Bibles that actually wrote it that way, that number was 0. Not one other Bible had it written as John Baptist. And that's the exact same thing I discovered about Matthew 14 verse 8, where it says, and she, being before instructed of her mother, said, give me here John Baptist's head in a charger. And again, I discovered that it was only the KJV who had it written as John Baptist, without the in the middle. The KJV was the only one. So I wonder why that might be, Jonathan. I mean, you always say that the Bible was written in a parable mystery, and you always say that you're the interpreter and was sent to interpret. So if we actually compared the verse in the New King James Version with the original King James Version, could you please interpret for everybody what the parable really meant? I mean, especially if you don't feel that these 2 verses are talking about some other John. And then there's 71 verses more that I found that just say John, and not John the Baptist. And out of those 71 times that it was used, I believe that each and every one of them were talking about and describing both people, both John and John the Baptist, because both of them were the same person. So I have a challenge for you, Jonathan, and that would be, out of those 71 verses that I've presented as me believing that they're all talking about John the Baptist, my challenge to you would be for you to try to prove me wrong. So I'm asking, out of those 71 verses, I remember you saying that a challenge issued to Elijah was a challenge already won, or a challenge already lost. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it was something along those lines. So there's my challenge to you, Jonathan. How many of those 71 verses are talking about some other John, other than John the Baptist? And in particular, Jonathan, which one of those verses do you interpret a single name of John as being you, as in Jonathan Nolan, who you say is Elijah?
I'm Elijah. Here, John is a shortened form of the common given name Jonathan, derived from Yahweh as given, and an alternate spelling of John derived from Yahweh as pardoned. When looking back at until John, I said there was a mystery. The law and the prophets were until John. It's in Luke 16, maybe in another epistle too, but here in Luke 16, if therefore ye have not been faithful in the unrighteous mammon, who will commit to your trust the true riches? And if ye have not been faithful in that which is another's man's, who shall give you that which is your own? No servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. Ye cannot serve God and mammon. And the Pharisees also, who were covetous, heard all these things, and they derided him. And he said unto them, Ye are they which justify yourselves before men, but God knoweth your hearts, for that which is highly esteemed among men is abomination in the sight of God. The law and the prophets were until John. Since that time the kingdom of God is preached, and every man pressed into it. And it is easier for heaven and earth to pass than one tittle of the law to fail. So it says until John. They say, well, it says it's John the Baptist.
So if the criteria for being John the Baptist is that the Bible has to say that it was John the Baptist, and if it only says John, that's when your opportunity to shove your name into the mix comes up. But what you're doing, Jonathan, is so far out there and desperate that it's blowing my mind. Because using your logic, Jonathan, the entire Gospel of John, it doesn't mention John the Baptist one time. So does that mean that they're not talking about John the Baptist in the book of John? Should we just start shoving your name in there whenever it just says John? And that way you could start off on all your I am Elijah rants? I mean, sorry, Jonathan. And again, let me tell everybody that this is just my opinion, but you have to admit that I'm at least bringing the scriptures to prove it. And you bring scriptures too, Jonathan. I'm not saying that you don't. But what I am saying is that you might want to start including the synoptic gospels rendering of what you're telling everybody. For instance, when you said that the two witnesses of John the Baptist had taken for granted that Jesus meant to go back to John the Baptist, because the verse only said to go show John all of these things, so you automatically say that the disciples had to guess as to who Jesus was talking about. But that's not the whole truth of the matter, because if you go to the Synoptic Gospels, it plainly states that the two disciples had indeed told Jesus that it was John the Baptist who had sent them in order to ask Jesus those questions right there in Luke chapter 7 verse 20. So if they told Jesus who it was who had actually sent them, being John the Baptist, how then can you say that they're describing some other John, aka you? And I don't believe that these are talking about different dimensions and times, that all these different stories are taking place either. You used that answer too many times in the past, but nothing seems to fit when you actually look up the other cross-references to these passages in the Bible so that we can see what you're up to. Because Luke 7:20, it says, When the men were come unto him, they said, John Baptist hath sent us to thee, saying, Art thou he that should come? Or look we for another? So who was it that sent them to Jesus, Jonathan? It was John the Baptist, wasn't it? How could it not be John the Baptist? I mean, the synoptic gospel of Luke clearly shows that it was John the Baptist. So why do you keep telling everybody that Jesus was talking about a different John, and that different John just so happened to be you? But that's just my observation on the whole matter, and of course it's not set in stone, but it's pretty damn close, that much I can tell you. Because let's look at the book of John, just the first chapter. The Word becomes flesh. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. Now here we go, John 1:6. There was a man sent from God, whose name was John. Now let me ask you, Jonathan, is this John in verse 6? Is that you? Because it doesn't say John the Baptist, and that's your criteria, remember? There was a man sent from God, whose name was John. The same, okay, this is the same John as the one they're talking about. The same John came for a witness to bear of the light, that all men through him might believe. He was not that light, but was sent to bear witness of that light. That was the true light, which lighteth every man that cometh into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made by him, and the world knew him not. He came unto his own, and his own received him not. But as many as received him, to them gave he power to become the sons of God, even to them that believe on his name, which were born not of blood, nor of the will of flesh, nor the will of man, but of God. And the Word was made flesh, and dwelt among us. And we beheld his glory, the glory of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. Okay, John 1:15. Are they talking about John the Baptist here, or are they talking about you, Jonathan? It says, John bare witness of him, and cried, saying, This was he of whom I spake. He that come after me is preferred before me, for he was before me. Now, is that talking about John the Baptist? Because it sure sounds like it's the same thing that was written in the other Gospels.
It says John. It says John. Not John the Baptist. They took for granted. He's describing someone else. I'm telling you, okay?
And of his fullness have all we received, and grace for grace. For the law was given by Moses, but grace and truth came by Jesus Christ. No man hath seen God at any time. The only begotten Son, which is in the bosom of the Father, he hath declared him.
But Jesus here in the word, he's not saying John the Baptist. He's saying, he said unto the multitude concerning John.
The testimony of John the Baptist, John 1:19. And this is the record of John. When the Jews sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, Who art thou? And he confessed and denied not, but confessed, I am not the Christ. And they asked him, What then? Art thou Elias? And he saith, I am not. Art thou that prophet? And he answered, No. Then they said unto him, Who art thou? That we may give an answer to them that sent us. What sayest thou of thyself? He said, I am the voice of one crying in the wilderness, Make straight the way of the Lord, as said the prophet Isaiah. And they which were sent were of the Pharisees. And they asked him, and said unto him, Why baptizest thou then, if thou be not that Christ, nor Elias, neither that prophet? John answered them, saying, I baptize with water. So I guess that would be John the Baptist, even though it doesn't say John the Baptist, right? That's not talking about you, is it? Jonathan Nolan or Elijah. It's not talking anything about you, but it just says John.
So are you sure that he was really referring to John the Baptist?
But there standeth one among you whom ye not know. He it is who, coming after me, is preferred before me, whose shoe latchet I am not worthy to unloose. These things were done in Bethabara beyond Jordan, where John was baptizing. So is that the guy named John, and he was baptizing people. So therefore they called him John the Baptist. It wasn't his name like I discussed earlier. It was just some title that they gave him because he baptized people. Behold, the Lamb of God. The next day, John seeth Jesus coming unto him. See, there's no John the Baptist anywhere in this whole book. The next day, John seeth Jesus coming unto him, and saith, Behold, the Lamb of God, which taketh away the sin of the world. This is he of whom I said, After me cometh a man which is preferred before me, for he was before me. And I knew him not, but that he should be made manifest to Israel. Therefore am I come baptizing with water. And John bare record, saying, did you bear record there, Elijah, or Jonathan? Did you bear record, saying that I saw the Spirit descending from heaven like a dove, and it abode upon him? Was that you, or was that John the Baptist? You know, the guy they named John at birth? And I knew him not, but he that sent me to baptize with water, the same said unto me, Upon whom thou shalt see the Spirit descending, and remaining on him, the same is he which baptizeth with the Holy Ghost. And I saw and bear record that this is the Son of God. So when it says, and I saw and bear record that this is the Son of God, the I in there, that's not you, is it, Jonathan? Jonathan Nolan? Elijah? That's not you. That's John the Baptist, right?
Believe it or not, by subject, I'm going to overturn your video that you said that you challenged me over. Are you stupid or what?
The last one, we'll just go through the first chapter. Jesus calls the first disciples. Again, the next day after John stood, and two of his disciples. See, these are the same two disciples that went and asked Jesus about whether or not if he was the one. But here it says, and John stood, and two of his disciples. So which John is that in John 1:35? Is that you, Jonathan? Is that you, Jonathan Nolan, Elijah? Or is that John the Baptist? Even though it doesn't say John the Baptist, it just says John. I still think it's John the Baptist.
Are you stupid or what?
And looking upon Jesus as he walked, he said, Behold, the Lamb of God. And the two disciples heard him speak, and they followed Jesus. Then Jesus turned and saw them following, and saith unto them, What seek ye? They said unto him, Rabbi, which is to say, being interpreted, Master, where dwellest thou? He saith unto them, Come and see. And they came and saw where he dwelt, and abode with him that day. For it was about the 10th hour. One of the two which heard John speak. Which John was that? Was that you, Jonathan Nolan, Elijah? Or was that John the Baptist?
It says John. It says John. Not John the Baptist. They took for granted. He's describing someone else. I'm telling you, okay?
One of the two which heard John speak and followed him was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. He first findeth his own brother Simon, and saith unto him, We have found the Messiah, which is, being interpreted, the Christ. And he brought him to Jesus. And when Jesus beheld him, he said, Thou art Simon, the son of Jonah. Thou shalt be called Cephas, which is, by interpretation, a stone. So are you sure that this John that's found in the book of John, it isn't talking about John the Baptist, maybe, Jonathan? Jonathan Nolan, Elijah? It's not John the Baptist, right? It's you.
So are you sure that he was really referring to John the Baptist?
But it's not. It was John the Baptist, because John was his name.
Believe it or not, by subject, I'm going to overturn your video that you said that you challenged me over. Are you stupid or what? Are you stupid or what?